right. Welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast. I've got Amir Ghannad on the show today. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's a consultant in the world of leadership development, organizational transformation, culture transformation, all that cool stuff. He's got a cool professional history as well, including leadership roles at Procter & Gamble, Campbell Soup. I'm excited to dive in with him. Amir, welcome to the show, my man.
Thanks so much, Jake. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I had a guest on the show recently, Max Story, his wife, Ria Story, after we got off and the show and posted it and kind of emailing back and forth. Mac reaches out to me personally. He goes, "Hey, there's this guy, Amir. You should have him on. Like, Amir is a rock star. He's an awesome guy, such an interesting guy." And then I looked you up and I was like, Mac is not leading me in the wrong direction. Like, Amir seemed really interesting. Thank you for responding to my request, man.
No, thank you so much, Mac. I appreciate his support and advocacy, and Mac and Ria are some of the best people on the planet that you would ever meet, and I have tremendous respect for them. And so when you reached out to me and you said that, Mac had recommended it, so I'm like, right here, man, I'm jumping on it. The opportunity. Thanks.
Let's do it. Hey, I love to get anchored in. Like, origin stories are definitely kind of fun.
Sure.
Man, give me that little bit of who Amir is, man. You were not originally from the United States, to my understanding. Like, take me through that arc.
Sure. I'll give you the short version. I grew up in Iran. So I came to the States when I was 16 years old and came on my own. And there was a lot of unrest going on at the time, and the revolution. This is back in 1978. And so my parents could sense that was going on. They kind of were sending me outside of the country so I could get my education and go back when things quiet down, but things didn't quiet down. I didn't go back for 13 years. So I came to the States, landed in Boston in July 1978. And so, just basically through a lot of ups and downs and challenges, found my way down to Georgia, finished high school in Boston, Massachusetts, went to college in Georgia, eventually got my bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering. And along the way, met my wife, Connie. We got married. Basically, I was 19 years old when we got married. I always tell people I married my first wife when I was 19, and they expect me to say, well, it didn't work out. But fortunately for us, so far, so good. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary. And so
funny,
then
man. I got a quick story here. I love the way you phrase that. I married my first wife, when I was 19 years old. We're still together. My best man at my wedding came out and he said, "Hey, Jake told me if I do really good with his best man speech at this wedding, he'll let me do his next one too." That just popped into my head, man. But
that's good. That's good.
So you're 19, you're married, you're in Georgia.
Yeah. So then I started my career at Procter & Gamble in Albany, Georgia, or as it's pronounced, Albany, Georgia, because Albany is in New York, even though it's spelled the same way. But anyway, so in Albany, Georgia, I was there for about 8.5 years, did a variety of jobs. And really early on in my career, I discovered that I really had passion for organizational development. So even though I had a master's in mechanical engineering, I started getting involved in operations work and kind of a pseudo HR type roles and things like that. That was really my passion. And then from there, we went to Thailand for 5 years. So my wife and 2 kids and we went to Thailand. There was a 5-year sort of assignment there, started up a brand new plant with Procter & Gamble. Then we came back to the States, Dover, Delaware. And this is where I was doing a lot of organizational work. There was a merger that had just happened between Procter & Gamble and Scott Paper Company. And I came in and really supported that with the organizational sort of transition part of that. Then went back out to Germany for about 2.5 years, again with P&G, and was doing some work there that was kind of given me exposure to international work in a lot of different countries. From there, I left P&G and I joined Sunny D, which was a part of P&G that had just been divested. And we wanted to come back to Atlanta. So Sunny Delight, yeah.
Oh,
so
nice.
plant manager of the largest plant with Sunny D in Atlanta. And that's when I honestly, at that point, I'd had 19 years under my belt. I thought, was pretty good. But then I met the greatest challenge of my career, where our plant really very quickly, we found ourselves kind of being the worst plant in the company from a results and morale standpoint. So the next few years, basically, we turned that plant around from the worst to the best, not just in every result area, but also morale went through the roof. And it was just an amazing experience for me and everybody else at that plant. And then from there, I went to Campbell's Soup for about 3 years. I was with Campbell's, where I was responsible for global people excellence. And this is where I didn't really, for the first time in my career, I wasn't doing the organizational work on the side. That was actually my job. Because I always had some kind of a job in supply chain or manufacturing, and I was kind of covertly doing organizational work. But in this case, I was supporting multiple sites and things like that. And then in 2015, I published my book, The Transformative Leader. It's not my book, it's more my daughter's book than it is mine, because I had a lot of post-it notes and voice notes, but she kicked my butt. She took over and actually got this book published. And then she started getting on my case to say, look, we need to expand our reach. And so the two of us formed the Ghannad group. Essentially, eventually I left my corporate career. And this was about 5-6 years ago. And eventually her brother and her mother joined us as well. So my wife and I and both kids are the Ghannad group, where we guide leaders in creating extraordinary cultures that deliver breakthrough results and unprecedented fulfillment. And we've had a wonderful time doing that for the last 5-6 years.
That's a beautiful thing. I am.
So
I've got a 6-year-old daughter that is almost quite capable of managing me today as a human. I have a dream that a very similar thing will happen one day for me, as my daughter will step in and keep me organized and drive it forward and be able to work together and all that. And you're living the dream, man. What a beautiful
it's thing. A blessing, man. It's so amazing.
As I was preparing for this, I was thinking about culture, and I was thinking about transformation. I keep a long, like, OneNote document filled with like quotes that are broken up into different areas. I mean, I need to pull inspiration from it, or put it in front of my face to remember, because we forget everything that we've learned. So it's so important to go back and revisit. But this is one of my favorite quotes around culture, culture transformation. I can't remember who did it, so I can't attribute it. So my apologies there. But it says, culture does not change because we desire it to change. Culture changes when the organization is transformed. The culture reflects the realities of people working together every day. And I absolutely love that. And so we can't,
really good.
When we talk about culture, corporate culture, managing change, like, the word transformation comes up a lot. And then it's also in the title of your book. And I want to talk about, can we peel that word back from your perspective? What is transformation? What is transformational leadership? What is the role of transformation when we talk about culture future states and trying to get people to move towards some new way of being, working together, or et cetera?
Yeah, really a great topic, Jake. So let me tell you, first of all, as far as culture is concerned, I think this is where a lot of leaders struggle, to be honest. I think, we get to positions of leadership because we have some expertise in certain areas. And then we're like, oh, geez, this thing is in my way. This whole thing, this culture thing, these people, if it wasn't for people, if it wasn't for their behavior, we could really win. But how do I manage that? But it really is not as complicated as it sounds. So for me, the way I think of culture is in very simple terms. And that is, if I were a fly on the wall, right, and I was watching, I'm not talking about people's attitudes and mindset or whatever, even though I'm a huge fan of starting with our mindset. But what I'm saying is, I can tell what your culture is by just observing. Are people talking to each other across boundaries, or are they just working in their own silos? Are they solving problems to root cause, or are they band-aiding it and throwing it over to somebody else? what's going on in the organization. A fly on the wall can see like what is happening, and they can tell you immediately. Is like if I walk through an organization, I can, just listening to the words and people's demeanor and things like that, I can tell you, is this an organization where people feel valued and they want to bring their best, or is it that they drag themselves to work to do their 8 and hit the gate, right? And so that's kind of my view of the culture. But let's talk about transformation. Look, here's how I distinguish transformation from change in my book. I have a series of 21-point lessons in the book. And the first one really, I think the title is, why manage change when you can lead a transformation. Okay. And the distinction between change and transformation is this. I say, change is basically working with what you have and tweaking it, making it better, improving it. And there's certainly value in that, right? You and I are we have background in continuous improvement and that sort of thing. There's value in that. But what you ought to do, though, also is from time to time, basically say, if we were to start with a blank slate and create from nothing, what would that look like? And then looking back from there, identify some milestones that you would put in place that you would have to reach in order to make that happen. Now, I know that that's not completely realistic as it relates to the transition plan, because you don't have a blank slate. You are dealing with today's issues. So when it comes to actually making it happen, you still also have to deal with what's right in front of you. But at least if you have a transformative vision, and this is what transformative leaders do, they start with a transformative vision that really drives them, that energizes them. And then they begin to cause other people to see themselves in that future, so that when we're dealing with whatever's in front of us, we are at the same time excited about making that transformative future happen. And so that is how, in my mind, transformation comes about.
Yeah, it's that's beautiful, by the way. I love the why lead a change. Wait, say that again. Why lead a change when
why
you can
settle for for managing change when you can lead a transformation? Because managing change, look, I'm going to interrupt for just a second. Here's the thing. What I tell people is, like, I'm not anti-change. You got to be good at change. You got to adapt to change. You got to lead change, all of that. But here's the thing. You see, every transformation involves change, so you better be good at change. But not every change amounts to a transformation. Yeah. You see, that's the difference. If you don't have a transformative vision, you might go through change for the next 15 years and still find yourself in some other version of today's reality.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I've been a part of a couple of organizations who have enacted strategic imperatives, or these kind of this pillar strategy of things that we must do to remain competitive in our market, or to we need to get better at the way that we manage relationships. We need to, reduce costs and be innovative around supply chain. We need to have new products and services that folks love, and those types of things. And we need to move the culture in that direction all together. I think the difficult thing in that process is getting folks to recognize that their attitudes today are not the attitudes that they need to have to be successful with those goals and objectives. Like, they need to play differently on the field. So how do you help create some of that awareness? Like, how do you help people understand and reflect on how they're existing?
Yeah, see, so the work that I do with organizations always starts with what I call personal transformation. So yes, I know what you want is culture transformation, but let's face it, everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change themselves, right? I mean, some famous person said that. So bottom line is that if you want to go out and change the culture, the very first step is you've got to figure out how you are in the way, right? And how is it that you need to change yourself and transform yourself so you can begin to role model that? Because otherwise you're thinking, well, look, if everybody was like me, the world would be a fantastic place. But guess what? They're saying the same thing. In my case, when we turned our plant around, I had to come to a very difficult realization that I was the greatest barrier to success. I mean, like really, really, this was a very hard, bitter pill to swallow, but that's where I started. It was like I really got whacked upside the head one day, and I realized it's like, look, I am the barrier. And so the first step in making that happen is to put people through a conversation. I have a 4-hour conversation that I cannot tell you how many dozens and hundreds of times I've had around the world. And every single time when people go through this, and I introduce them to these 7 hidden saboteurs of success and fulfillment and the habits that come along with them, what happens is they go in doing this, like, we need to change our culture, to coming out doing this, saying, oh, you know what, it's me, I need to do this. And then when they come out of there and they collectively decide that they're going to look at themselves, then we begin to talk about culture. Because while there's no finish line to personal transformation, and that goes on, now we get to at least begin to say, okay, how do we actually shift the culture in a different direction? It starts with me role modeling it. It starts with me not just desiring a different culture, but really getting into people's world to say, okay, why is it that people are not engaged? It's not because they're bad people. Nobody goes to work and says, today I want to be mediocre. It's just that, we haven't created the conditions in which people come enthusiastic and energized to make things happen and create that culture. So it's on us.
That's lovely. I can't help but think when you're talking about those conversations people go into thinking it's the rest of the world, and then they come out with the realization that they've got a big part to play in it. There's an old saying too, is, every time I point a finger, I got 3 pointing back at me. Right.
Right.
Like, what am I doing to cause some of this? Or what am I not doing to cause some of this as well? I think probably an equally important question in your pursuit for helping organizations pinpoint that stuff. We've got I can't help but think about, when Donald Trump ran here in the States, he went with this platform of drain the swamp. He kept saying, drain the swamp, drain the swamp, drain the swamp. Right. It's interesting to think about from a political standpoint. Obviously he's making a nod at Washington, DC, and, the fact that it used to be a swamp and some of these things. So I get that. But like in organizational culture, sometimes it's pretty toxic. It's pretty swampy. It's pretty, and so I wanted to bring that quote in the light. Like, what is draining the swamp to you? Is there draining the swamp, or is it like changing it? Or like, how do you view that? Do you just have to cut bait with some people? Do you have to just like restructure and reorg and start anew? Or what's your perception on that?
Yeah, so the problem with slogans like that is oftentimes when people kind of try to make it look like they're draining the swamp, and they're the worst ones in actually filling the swamp, right? For me, it's like I don't necessarily get excited about all the slogans, because, and I used to tell my people, I said, listen, because after there was a problem with trust for leadership, right? So I stood up and I said, listen, I'm not going to tell you guys that I'm trustworthy and you should trust me and all of that, because everybody tells you that, right? Everybody tells you that. That doesn't set me apart from a good leader. But what I am asking you to do is put me to the test, right? So if you have a problem, come to me and then see what I do with it. Do I actually address it? Do I follow through or not? And that way I can prove to you that I am trustworthy or not, right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to sort of getting rid of some people, I think that's part and parcel to any transformation. It's not because some people are good, some people are bad. I really believe that we ought to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and we ought to treat them until the day that they're gone by their own free will or because we fired them or whatever. Until that day, I owe it to them to really create the conditions for them to bring their best to work. Now, does that always happen? No. Sometimes there's a difference between their value system and what we're trying to do, what our value system. Sometimes the performance is consistently not right and things like that. And in that case, what we owe people is a very straight and honest conversation to let them know where they stand. Treat them with dignity and respect and let them know, here's where you stand, this is the consequence and all of this. So in our situation, we ended up actually terminating several people. And honestly, many of them thanked me afterwards. They said, look, you did everything that you could, because they knew it wasn't because I was enjoying it or labeling them and all of this. I never tried to sort of label these kind of people this way, that kind of people, because that's the kind of thing that creates division. To me, leaders ought to unify. So it wasn't like these people are bad, these people are good, but it's like, look, we operate by these set of values and everybody is welcome to embrace them. And we're going to go this way and so on and so forth. And if you're not, we're going to have a conversation with you. We're going to let you know so you can make choices, whether you should be here or you shouldn't be here. But ultimately, I believe that if you are truly trying to make a transformation happen, what you will end up doing is that basically some people will leave because they self-select, and some people will leave because they just haven't had the courage to self-select, and you end up selecting for them to go be extraordinary somewhere else. But even in those cases, honestly, I don't have any ill feelings toward, yeah, there are a couple of people who did some things that were totally against our value system. Yeah, I don't approve of that, and I was very vocal about that. But somebody who doesn't perform and all that, we're not going to label them as losers and slackers and all that. We're just going to let them know where they stand, and we're going to let it take its course. So that's sort of where I'm at on it.
I love that. Thank you for that perspective. Yeah. I mean, somebody who's seeing, hundreds of different organizations going through different types of transformations. What are more surprising things when you dedicated yourself several years ago to this kind of work? Like, what did you learn that you didn't expect? Like something that just kind of like blew your mind about working with some of these companies or these organizations?
Well, yeah, it wasn't maybe not a complete surprise to me, but when I left the corporate world and I started doing my own consulting work, I began to make a kind of an observation that I could relate to my own experiences, but it became a lot more clear to me, and that is that especially in larger organizations, we tend to kind of think in generalities, and we roll out these programs and we do all the big things right, but then we lose touch with the very sort of touch point or that connectedness with everybody to actually win them over. And so to me, this is in smaller organizations where they are still able to connect with each other because there are not that many people and all that happens more naturally. Even in those cases, I think sometimes people need coaching. But when you go into larger organizations, somehow we get this feeling that if I have 100,000 people, I can no longer really do that. What are you talking about? Talk to people and this and that. We got all of these people. How do we do that? Well, and so for me, the observation that I've made is that, look, even when you are in a really huge organization, the principles of connecting with people and causing them to actually, choose to bring their best to work and all of that, the principles of it don't change. And so it's just a matter of not getting caught up in thinking, oh, just because we created a vision and just because we put it on the wall and we had a meeting and all of that, okay, 80% of the work is done. No, I have to constantly bring my clients down to no, that's 20% of the work. It's very important. But now the real work starts, because every single day, those people are trying to make a decision as to whether they can trust you or not, whether you got their back or not, whether you're going to give them the tools or not. And that is where the work is. And I think it's oftentimes neglected, to be honest.
Oh, 100%, especially in organizations that have experienced a lot of really fast growth. Right. Yep. And they've just kind of grown organically out of necessity, and they've just culture of putting out fires and new faces all the time, and that connection, that webbing that kind of brings us all together on the same team, it just kind of gets lost or it gets skewed. So then some areas of the business we've got it, some areas maybe we don't. Right.
Yeah.
So it's when you see
Yeah.
good behavior happening in certain areas of the organization and maybe groups or business units that are struggling, how might you try to unify that or pull the good parts of the culture, highlight those, and then try to maybe push out the negative aspects of culture?
Well, this is a very, very important part of culture transformation, you see, because I think, the first part of it to me is like really making it clear what our vision of ideal culture is, but a lot of times we kind of stop there and we hope that things happen and all this, but I think we need to follow through and distinguish good behavior from bad behavior. And what I mean by that is behavior that is in line with the future vision of our culture and behavior that is not, right? And so it's not to embarrass people or anything like that, but it's just like, let's recognize that there's a bell-shaped curve, right? There are some early adopters and there are people who are excited to make that future happen. And then there's a small percentage on this end that really kind of want to resist and they like it the way it is and they don't want to go there. And then you got the 70%, 75% in the middle who are trying to figure out which one of these people do I want to follow? Do I want to go this way or do I want to go that way? And so in a way, we as leaders who want to create an awesome culture are in competition, if you will, with these folks on this end who are telling people like, we've seen this before, right? This is program of the month. It's not going to happen. You've seen that in 1989. Remember that guy, such and such, right? And so we're in competition with those guys. And one of the best ways to me, to win people over is constantly highlight the wins, constantly highlight the right behaviors that are in line with that future. When something happens, when we have a small win even, magnify it. We set a vision for ourselves in that plan. We said we're going to be the showcase of excellence and the cradle of prosperity. Okay, the cradle of prosperity was just as important to us because Showcase of Excellence had to do with delivering great results. But Cradle of Prosperity said that we want our workplace to be a source of inspiration and prosperity for our people, right? And so when we began to deliver some good results, we wanted to run a whole month at like 85% efficiency, right? But we were at like 65. But if I found out that somebody on third shift ran at 80% for 1 hour, man, it would be plastered everywhere on the walls. And it's like, yeah, C shift did this, and we can do it for an hour, we can do it for a shift. If we can do it for a shift, we can do it for a week. So highlight the results. But also just as important, and perhaps more important, is behaviors. We had like a hall of fame for our safety behavior. Or kind of a I don't know what we got, like a wall of fame or something like that.
Yeah.
For communication.
No, let's make it a hall. Let's not do just a wall. Let's make it a hall of fame. Yeah.
Exactly.
Put
Right.
it in Ohio.
Yeah, exactly. So we did everything that we possibly could to publicly acknowledge good stuff, results, and behaviors, and then privately confront behavior that was not in line. And in some cases, we had to publicly, speak out against certain behavior. And if somebody behaved a certain way on my leadership team, I had to let people know, look, that is not representative of what I support. I think this is so important when it comes to leadership.
Yeah. The other thing I really wanted to get some perspective on, and I'm swimming in the deep end here, so these are just some assumptions now, right?
Sure.
You're pretty well traveled from what I can tell, and doing some research on you. Traveled 40 plus countries, lived in 3 or 4 of them. By the way, I'd love to get back to talking about Thailand. Like I want to go there for an extended visit. Like I'd love to go there for a couple months and just like kickbox and hang out on the
That would
beach.
be
Like,
great.
that's a dream. But when we talk about culture, organizational culture, there's also cultural differences for international companies. And so
Yes.
I imagine the way that we approach change and change management and the communication around transformational change as it pertains to different geographies and different cultures is very different. What's your perspective on some of that and some of your experience maybe in helping organizations make head or tails about what to communicate and how?
Yeah. So this is really great because I mean I grew up in Iran. I live in Portugal right now. Travel back and forth to the States and to serve my clients and all of this. But in the meantime, also Thailand and Germany. So I've seen different parts of this, right? So for me, the way I think about it is when it comes to culture transformation, there are some timeless and universal principles that honestly apply everywhere. Like I have never seen any organization, any person, anywhere in the world who just really enjoys being kept in the dark, not given any information, and just being told what to do. That is just not the case, okay?
Right.
However, the way we express that is very different in Thailand versus in Germany, right? So the thing about it is like, the style of communication and how direct you are or how subtle you are in your communication, what sort of method do you use and that sort of thing. I think those methods need to be tailored to the local culture. And this, by the way, is not just international. I mean, let's not assume, right, that in the States we have the same culture everywhere. I had a plant in Atlanta and one in New Jersey, and those two had very different cultures,
Oh yeah.
right? And so I think it's sometimes we get I'll tell you just a very quick story. When we went to Thailand, the company I was working for at the time, Procter & Gamble, to put us through a week of culture training. And so literally this husband and wife took me and my wife out to eat and here, don't do this, you should do this, that's a taboo, blah, blah, right? A week, because they said culture is very different here. You need to be aware. Then we went to Germany, and essentially we had like an afternoon of orientation, and they said, this is Germany. It's kind of like in the States, which could not be could not be further from the truth. Because here's the thing, while it may seem like it's a Western country and all this, I mean, Germans have some very specific ways of doing things. I mean, just doing a recycle in Germany, you almost need a PhD. I mean, it is crazy.
Yeah.
Some things are very, very different. And so we kind of learn through the school of hard knocks what to do, what not to do. So it's the same is true here in the States. When you go to a culture in a certain state or in a certain company, you got to keep your eyes and ears open to make sure that you truly understand what is going on with that particular culture so you can speak that language.
Yeah. And if you're not being thoughtful about it, I mean, that's where you kind of trip up in this. I mean, the ham-fisted way that some organizations communicate absolutely baffles me. I think back to when I was a kid. I lived in South Louisiana, okay, Lafayette. I got born in, like I said, kind of deeper South, thick Cajun accents all over the place. My last name's Blanchard. It's definitely like a Cajun last name. I moved to Alaska when I was 10. And my parents held me to a very high standard of saying ma'am and sir. Right. So that's what I was doing. I moved up to Alaska, and it's ma'am this and sir that. Now, Alaska has a lot of kind of, I would consider like rugged individualists. They also, though there's an appreciation for the ma'am and sir, my teachers thought I was being like sarcastic. And so they would be telling my parents like that I'm, being sarcastic or rude or whatever. And I'm saying, I'm just looking at it from like, I'm saying ma'am and sir, and then they're telling me not to say it, but my parents are telling me to say it. So I'm doing what my parents are telling me. And like, right. And it's just that missing communication right there, that cultural difference that's just so nuanced and tiny can completely sour somebody's perspective of an individual or what they're trying to do.
That is so true.
So then how do you prepare for some of that stuff? Like, do you have to like deep dive in the culture? Do you find like cultural experts in those areas? Like, do you just kind of lean into that? Like, what's the process?
So, for me, the way it worked out was, when we moved to Thailand, I heard a lot about how the culture is very different, to the point where I was a bit overwhelmed around, well, geez, how do you learn this culture? We're talking about thousands of years of history and so many nuances. But ultimately, when I got there, I discovered that really the best way is to connect with one person at a time. I mean, one person at a time. So it's like whoever's in front of me. Yes, we did study that, you don't put your foot up on a table or whatever. I mean, the foot, you don't do anything with your foot. You don't kick anybody's chair with a foot. You don't keep the door open with a foot or whatever. That's just not, there's some things that you just need to know. Like as a foreigner, do not do this when you go to this country. So those things we studied. But when it came to actually understanding the culture and that sort of thing, I found that I couldn't even stereotype to say all the Thais are this way. And so what I learned to do was really get to know one person at a time. And after a while, I could see what is common. Like all of them preferred communication to be delivered to them in a kind of a softer manner, as opposed to like hitting them between the eyes, as I experienced in Germany. In Germany, if I started beating around the bush, people started saying, why are you acting all American and all this? Just tell me like it is or whatever. So after a while, when you get to know people, you will see some of those common threads, but you also see that each of them has their own personality, their own preference. So yes, do your studying and do your homework on the front end, but then get to know the people. And that's what it comes down to. I mean, for me, it's like one of the things that was really important is also to try to learn the culture, the language. Yeah. So I think I took like 350 hours of Thai. I never got to be fluent, but I got to a point where I understood, much of what was going on in the plant and things like that. So people appreciate that when you put some effort into at least speaking their language. So those are the kinds of things that worked for me.
So again, in your role, this is kind of a tough question, but I'm going to throw it at you because I believe that we don't take losses, we take lessons in life. Yeah. So I'm really curious, like in your pursuit of helping organizations transform, changing culture, helping leaders lead better, what stands out as like man, I wish I would have had that one back. Man, I wish I would have approached this problem differently, or I wish I would have had this, like, ask this question to gain this insight so I didn't step on that landmine. Like anything that you can share around that?
Yeah. So I always tell people, I said, look, I wrote this book, The Transformative Leader, but if I wrote a book about everything that I did that didn't work, it would be 3 times as thick. So there are just all kinds of things that I learned, both as a leader in organizations that report to me, as well as a consultant. I'll just start with something that I really did very, very wrong in a large, for many, many years in my career. Like in that plant that I told you about, for months, what I was doing was all the things that were wrong. I was compiling them on this sheet of paper and organizing them, and we were going to tackle all of them and assigning names and all this. And after a while, it became so clear to me that I wasn't helping anybody because I wasn't helping us set priorities. I was just simply organizing everything and assuming that everything is going to be done. You do this, we do this, we do that together and all that. We weren't making any choices. And so one of the things that I learned from that in my consulting practice is that I apply in my consulting practice is, I ask organizations, what are some choices that you're making, right? Because, you should only have 1 or 2 breakthrough priorities, things that you're going to make a step change in. Then some of them are improvement priorities and the rest are maintained. So if you're not clear about which bucket the priorities fall into, and if you have not made it clear to the organization, then you got to make that happen, right? So the other thing that I will tell you, a mistake that I made many years ago, before I even actually started my business, I worked as a professional facilitator. So I would take a CEO and their direct reports or their team to the mountains for 3 days, and we would facilitate, like we would come back with a 5-year plan. And so I had like literally every single, event that I had was wildly successful. It was just really, it was part of sort of how I do things anyway. I'm a natural facilitator, but there was one that was a complete disaster. Okay. And this was a nonprofit organization. They had a board and all of this, and the person who was in charge of, the chairwoman or whatnot, she was very clear about telling me how I should facilitate a certain session, not just here's what we need and these are the guidelines, this is what's going on, but she was dictating every step. And I was very new at that stuff at that time. And so I tried to please her by listening and incorporating and all of that. And so by the time I go into this session, it's like, I'm not only trying to do the work that I'm supposed to do, but I have to do it her way, right? And it reminds me of a mechanic about 40 years ago who taught me the greatest lesson in delegation. Because my car had broken down, I took it to the mechanic. I said, listen, I want you to change the alternator. He said, well, the problem is not your alternator. I said, no, I want you to change the alternator. So he looked me in the eye and said, look, here's the thing. I can either change your alternator or I can fix your car. What do you want me to do? Right? So of course I told him, fix the car. Now in this case, this lady wanted the car fixed and she wanted the alternator fixed. And I failed to really call her on that and say, look, I can either meet your objectives or I can do it exactly this way. If we do it this way, it doesn't work. Anyway, so that meeting was a disaster. And so I learned a lesson from that, in that, I'm very clear with my clients that, look, we're in this together. I'm a guide. I'm not some hero in the front saying we're going to go do this, but there's certain expertise that I have that I'm going to throw out here. And if you want things done a certain way, I'll accommodate as much as possible. But there comes a time where I said, look, no, we cannot do it that way. And I'm not going to just sit back and let you tell me exactly how to do it, and then come back and tell me why, you did this and it didn't work. So I've learned these lessons through the school of hard knocks from my own experience, but now I get the benefit of applying them in my, practice.
Yeah, I think that, there's so much to be said about setting expectations in situations like that. Whereas, the clear roles and responsibilities. I am the subject matter expert in creating containers for this conversation. I'm the subject matter expert for leading where we're going to go and what we're going to talk about conceptually. You're the subject matter expert in providing the insights and the expertise that you have in this business and this problem set and about what's important. That's a powerful one, man. I appreciate you sharing that. So you got a book, you're an author, you're publishing stuff all the time on LinkedIn as well. Super, super active out there and sharing knowledge and insights. Like, what's going on with you this year? 2022, man. It's January. What are you looking forward to? What are you out and about doing?
Yeah, so I have to tell you, my wife and I come up with a kind of a phrase or a word for the year. And last year, our word was liberation. And so liberation, what it meant to us was, we want to get rid of some things in our lives that no longer serve us and things like that. We want to simplify things and all of this. And we really did that. And we made a plan to move to Portugal. We downsized our big house into a smaller one, got rid of 70% of our things that we had accumulated for years and that sort of thing. And so this year, we were just, we live about 10 minutes from a beach here. It's a really wonderful place. And we were just walking around and talking about our word for the year. And we came up with two things, right? Two words, and which is kind of a yin and the yang for us. And we wrote it in the sand and that sort of thing. One word is exploration. So we just moved to Portugal. We want to explore. We want to learn new things. We want to go to new places and things like that. But the second word is contentment. As in, like, we're going to have both of these together because we're going to explore, but not in order to get somewhere. We're going to be content with how things are. So this year, essentially, personally for us, that's what it's about. We love our new life. We loved our old life too, but I just feel like, you ought to design and live a life that you love. You owe it to yourself. So we've done that personally. Professionally, we've been really, really blessed to have had some really great success in the last 5 years or so. And so what we're doing now is we are delivering a lot of virtual, for the last couple of years since the pandemic, most of our events have been virtual anyway, but we've now also created e-courses and membership platforms and things like that, so we can serve people all over the world without necessarily being there. So that's sort of what's going on with us.
That's beautiful. I love your contentment sentiment there. And that's actually, so I don't do New Year's resolutions. I haven't for the last 3 years. What I do is I sit down, I reflect on the last year, and I think about the things that served me really well. And I think about areas that I need to improve in. And I write 12 tenets. Like that's kind of, so that's new every year. A lot of them is the same stuff. I just find different ways of saying it. Like my relationship with food, food is fuel. Like for me this year, it's about like fueling my body as opposed to, I kind of gave into some of the mouth pleasure on the back end of the year. But going back to contentment, I'm looking up at my wall here. You aren't searching for yourself. You know it, act like it. And so I've been on a personal development journey over the last 6 years. It started with a tremendous amount of weight loss, or tremendous, like 50 pounds. Started with 50 pounds of weight loss, and then reading books on ownership and personal responsibility, and, really trying to take those things seriously to improve myself. And I've gotten to a point where this operating system to which I'm using day to day is working really well and serving for me, but I still feel like it's not enough. And I feel like I'm still searching, And it's like, hey, why don't you just enjoy the guy that you are right now and be really confident in who you are and what you're doing? And like this year for me, it's contentment. It's living life at this level, always getting better, but like not searching for who does Jake need to be. Jake is who he is right now, and he's happy with who he is. And that's a beautiful thing. So I love that. I love that sentiment.
No, I absolutely love it, Jake. I mean, and this is, all the way to like New Year's resolutions. I love this, just basically setting your intentions and things like that. But, there's a chapter in my book, one of the 1-point lessons, talks about the power of paradox. So we have so many, for me, paradoxes are so transformative, right? So I have one that says, I am the one, and it's not about me. And it's like, well, if I'm the one, it ought to be about me. But no, I am the one. I take full responsibility in the context of what I'm committing to. But it's not about me. It's about the mission. Because if it's all about you, you cannot be the one. I mean, that's what I believe. Truly, as a leader, it cannot be about you. It has to be about somebody else. And so the same thing is true when it comes to any other aspect of life. It's like, look, contentment doesn't mean, oh, just sit there and be okay with whatever's going on. No, contentment could come with, again, having some initiative and some desire to make things better, but at the same time, saying, you know what, I'm good where I am, and this is where I want to go. So if you can embrace both sides of that paradox, it's amazing.
I think that that's what I'm going to name this episode, is if it's all about you, you cannot be the one. That is powerful, man. That is some really powerful stuff. I have certainly enjoyed this conversation. We are starting to wrap up on time here. I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where to find you, where to get your book, or any other information that you have to share today.
Well, thank you so much, Jake. I've totally enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. For me, it's the book is The Transformative Leader. We generally bring people, it is on Amazon, but we bring people to our website, the Ghannad Group, Ghannad, theghannadgroup.com. You can also find out more about our the 4-hour course that I told you about with the 7 hidden saboteurs and the habits. We've actually turned that into an e-course that we're getting ready to release release. So it's discovertransformation.com. If you go there and sign up to be basically notified when the course comes out, you also get a discount code and things like that. So those are a couple of places. Of course, I would love for folks to join my network on LinkedIn as well. That would be a place where I hang out a lot. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
100%, man. I will put the discovertransformation.com, the Ghannad and your LinkedIn profile in the comments section or in the notes section of this podcast. I'm looking forward to having you on the podcast again in the future, man. I hope you keep your dance card open for me, maybe later in the year, early next year. Thank you
so much.
I've learned a ton today. So thanks for your time, man, and enjoy Portugal.
I've enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much.
Cheers.